This first lesson is about Agile, Lean and Scrum. At Gladwell, we normally start with the history of these things to get you a bit in touch with the why and the context of things. So I'm going back to the 1970s in which Toyota, a car factory in Japan, had a problem. They were trying to beat Ford at their game of manufacturing cars, and at the same time they saw Ford was way bigger than them. It would be impossible to do the same things Ford did and at the same time beat them at it. So they figured they had to come up with something else, something new. And so they revolutionized the way manufacturing works with, as we now know, lean manufacturing. At that time it was called the Toyota Production System. Now the Toyota Production System is the foundational element on which lean has been built. And it is important to understand this, as it is basically foundational for the way we do software development and development in Scrum and Agile these days. The first thing is that they found that to build a system in a lean way, they figured they had to have three pillars on which they are going to put the foundation of their system. The first pillar was really the pillar of respect for people. They understood that without people being respected for their craftsmanship, being respected for their contribution, it would not work out well. So the respect for people was the first foundational pillar on which they built their system, which was later called the House of Lean. So the respect for people was one of the first things they understood. And this is put in the perspective of Japanese culture, meant as, I expect nothing but the best of you. I expect craftsmanship. And I expect you to grow into that as much as you can. So respect for people is really pillar one. Now pillar two was the actual middle pillar, which was called flow. And flow you may know as just-in-time or just-in-time delivery. And it's the idea of only building something or manufacturing something or do a step into the process when it's needed by the next station. So a pull-based, dragging things through based on demand rather than based on pushing, based on capacity, was a new way to ensure that the biggest problem of manufacturing would not occur, which is inventory. Inventory is the big problem in trying to resolve manufacturing problems. It's the biggest cost of all, having thousands of parts and cars everywhere lying around. So they figured that we only start producing a car when the customer requires it and buys it. Then we would have a lot less cars in production at any moment in time. So that means that if you have errors, you can go faster. You don't have to wait for things. We have less cost in moving things around and storing things. The cost of holding on to stuff then actually becomes lower. So that is flow. And flow is based on a demand-based, a pull-based use of your capacity. The third pillar on which they built the house that they were kind of shaping was the continuous improvement track. So this is the third pillar. Continuous improvement. Understood basically that whatever they come up with at the start of such an implementation of a new way of working, the House of Lean, they would get it wrong. And continuous improvement ensures that everybody starts to work toward what does work. What makes it faster, better, cheaper, higher quality, and all these other wonderful things that you will get. So in continuous improvement, flow, and respect for people are the three pillars on which the lean manufacturing system, the Toyota Production System, was founded. Now this was all done with a cause. And the cause, of course, was to only build value for the customer and nothing but it, nothing but value. So the value space is what they really build onto as a roof on their house to say, this is what we do it for. Everything that adds value, we do. Everything that doesn't, we try to eliminate. This is also what you see as eliminate waste sometimes as a very important factor in lean implementations. It's only a part of it, but it's an important part to think of. Anything we do, we have to do with customer value in our minds. This is all then carried by the supporting system, leadership and management. All kind of tools on leadership and management is at the bottom of this House of Lean, as you can see in the picture. Leadership and management is there for supporting rather than for pushing and directing the workforce and the company. So it's the idea of putting the organization chart almost upside down, as leadership is there to carry and support the people who do the work. This is the foundational element of lean, basically saying, I want to ensure that everything we do is about this value and that everything around it is organized to those who add value. So the teams who actually build the stuff are at the center of the organization, and all management, support, leadership systems and all these things around it are to support it, rather than on top of it to direct it. That's the foundational element of the House of Lean. So, this is in the 1970s. The problem was manufacturing and trying to cut cost on inventory. The resolution was to build a House of Lean with respect for people, flow and continuous improvements as the foundational elements, the pillars of it, carried by leadership and pointed towards the only thing you have to do as a company, which is to provide value to the customer. So we continue our quest through history in 1994. We pick up at 1994. In the 1970s we had Lean, and in 1994 we have Scrum. Jeff Sutherland, together with Ken Schwaber, invents Scrum. They come up with a defined, formalized model for software development that is based on a couple of principles that are quite interesting. I'm going to only very briefly explain what happened. In the 1990s, software development and the IT world was kind of a mess. Everybody was trying to get projects better described and better requirements and all that, but the reality of the time was that projects were overdue, they were too late, they were over budget, so they ran out of cost. They were producing a high volume of bugs and problems, low quality, and IT was not really what the customer needed. In best case, it was agreed on what you know at the start of a project when you know the least. So the problems of IT were basically saying it's too expensive, it takes too long, it's crappy quality, and it's not what we need. The world was at a place where software developers and teams were working their butts off to really get good quality software out, and the results were basically, well, not satisfying. So they were banged on their head by people who were saying, no, this is not what we need, it's crappy, etc. These effects led to a range of solutions that were tried. And in 1994, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber came up with Scrum. And Scrum was founded on a couple of simple things that said, well, what if we don't try to implement all the requirements at the start and define all the requirements up front? What if we learn and use a more empirical approach to software development rather than a plan-driven, long cycle approach that we now have? So the concept of Scrum is real simple. What if we build a list of the things we think we need and we prioritize that list? And the most wanted things we go to do first. And we want some feedback. So this is actually pulled into, in a lean way, a cycle of development. And during that cycle, a team will try to build that and really show actual working stuff. So now you have a system that says, okay, here's a list of stuff we need, or think we need. This is the most important thing, so it might be the best to start with. Build me that, show me that, we learn something and we'll do it again. This empirical approach to software development is now known as Scrum. And Scrum is a model that says, okay, let's make a list, commit to something, plan. So plan or promise something. So there's a promise of what we're going to do in the next coming 2 weeks. And after the 2 weeks, we'll show you. We'll have proof. And this promise-proof cycle of 2 weeks is called a sprint. And during a sprint, we'll work together as a team, as a Scrum team. People can actually do this and we'll test, analyze, design, do anything we need to actually get a product done at the end of these 2 weeks. That would mean that a customer would get every 2 weeks a living sample, a living increment, a potentially shippable product that he can test, feel, touch, smell, and look at and say, no or yes, it's not exactly what I need. I want you to do it a little bit different. So that idea of cyclic or iterative development is actually revolutionized by Scrum. There's a number of formal roles and responsibilities to this, but the foundational element is that you say, here's a backlog, a product backlog of things I think I need, pull something out of it in a very lean way, based on your capacity as a multidisciplinary team of testers, developers, analysts, and designers, build me something in 2 weeks that I can see, that you can show me. So I can give you feedback on whether you understand what I need, on whether I still need what I thought I need. These assumptions then all of a sudden become more flexible to reality by learning how to build it and learning what you need. This cycle is then ended every single time with a little retrospective to reflect on how we did the cycle and what can we improve to get it even better. This is the continuous improvement cycle built into the model. If you look at Scrum from that perspective, it's a promise, execute, proof, demonstrate, retrospective cycle. And then there's the infamous daily stand-up inside that kind of keeps the team to communicate and collaborate on a daily basis. So that was a stolen practice from one of the great teams in history where Jeff and Ken basically stole that idea and said, this is something good the teams can use to have a better understanding of what everybody is doing. So, this is a small team of 7 plus or minus 2 people working together every 2 weeks in a sprint, show something that they have promised and prove that it can actually be done. That way the teams learns how much you can do, the customer learns what it means to get it and what he likes about it and what he doesn't like about it. And he'll get some idea about what it means to get the whole product. If you start to build increment after increment after increment, you have a continuous improvement flowing system that respects the people because they have full autonomy within the 2 weeks to do whatever it takes to get this thing done. So in that way, it's a fully lean system if you look at Scrum at its foundational core. Fast forwarding to 2001 now. In 2001, the world was trying to figure out how to get software development to a better place. There was all kinds of messes going on. There were, of course, methods like XP, extreme programming, Scrum, and more trying to figure it out and trying to resolve the problem of software development. But still, the world was not looking better with regards to developing software and getting better value to our customers along the scale. At that point in time, 2001, Dave Thomas, one of the Agile thinkers and practitioners, organized a software improvement workshop in a ski hut in Vermont. So he invited 16 other great thinkers, among which were Kent Beck, Mike Beadle, Alistair Coburn, Martin Fowler, Brian Merrick, Ron Jeffries, Ken Schwaber, Jeff Sutherland, Robert C. Martin, Jim Highsmith, and a number more. These came together at 2001 in that ski hut in Vermont. And they said, okay, let's figure this out. Let's get this over with. And let's improve the way we do. This idea of planning the work and then working the plan, these long cycles of months and months or even years and years of software developers, then coming up, ta-da, with this product, it demonstrably does not work. We are over budget every time, we're too late, we're too expensive, it has low quality, and it's not what the customer needs. Apparently, people don't always know up front what they need. And apparently, we don't know how to build it either. So this plan-driven approach has to stop. We have to come up with something more empirical, something more cyclic, that kind of tests all the time. So they sat together and said to each other, let's try to figure this out. All these thinkers like Jeff with Scrum and Kent Beck with XP, they had new ideas and they were struggling and arguing and trying to figure out what is the right way to come up with one conclusion. At a certain point, they recognized that trying to figure out this one method that rules them all, so to speak, doesn't work. So they come up with something better. They come up with a manifesto for agile software development that says, here's something that always you can adhere to, whatever the method looks like. This is like your compass. And if you do this, you'll probably do it right. They call it agile because that means you're flexible, you're apt to change, you can respond to what happens. And the manifesto had a couple of foundational values that has since then driven software development, product development even, to higher grounds. So whatever your method is, whether it's Scrum or XP or RUP or whatever you want, at least make sure you adhere to these values and the underlying principles strongly. And the idea is that they were trying to uncover better ways of software development by doing it and by helping others to do it. And they have come to value through that. There's a couple of foundational truths. The first being individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And I explain this often saying, if a process or a tool is hampering the people from working together, change the tool or the process. Or look at it another way. Ask any project manager why his project was a success. They will all give you the same typical answer of, it's because we had some wonderful people, we made some changes to the process, we bended the rules even. Those are typical things project managers say that made their projects succeed. So this little line at the top of the manifesto says, individual interactions are always more important for a project's success than processes and tools. So then you have a first set. Now the second rule was then working software is always more important than comprehensive documentation. I often say, if you have comprehensive documentation for stuff you don't even have yet, what are you doing with it? Why do you need documentation for software or a product that you don't have? Only after you have the working software, the documents become relevant as well. So stay on the same line. Trying to build the documentation as you build the product is more effective and more useful, less wasteful, because just work out the complete documentation of everything you're going to have and then start building it. I often say it's better to build something that you can talk about than to talk about what you're going to build. Now with these two values in place, you have something of a chance. You have an opportunity to show your customer real stuff. And the third value kind of builds on that, saying customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And this has been long time misunderstood, where people think, yeah, well, that's just for customers. We have internal processes. And internal processes have just the same kind of dynamic. If you're constantly talking about whether something is a bug or a change request or a fault, you're basically doing contract negotiation. And of course people need contracts. I often say it's like a marriage. If you're married, you have a contract. But every time the toothpaste is not properly closed or the bed was not nicely laid out, you don't draw out the contract and say, hey, this is not according to the contract. You deal with it in a more collaborative way. Only when the collaboration doesn't work all the time, when you've hit the point 20, 25, 30, 50 times again and again and it doesn't change, then you'll say, our collaboration is not working, we need to do something out. And that's where you pick up the contract. So in product development, we saw the exact opposite, where for every nitty-gritty detail, the contract was pulled out, and it was like, it's not according to the specifications. You need to build this because we agreed on it. Here it says. Rather than having that discussion, I'd rather say, how about we have a meaningful discussion about what we need to do to get to higher grounds, which is the customer collaboration side. Now, if you have a working stuff coming to your customers, you can actually show it. It's easier to collaborate. So the order of things of the manifesto is actually important. If you have a working product to collaborate with your customer on, something special happens. Because then they start responding to change instead of following the plan. And that is the next value. I often say, a plan is great. The biggest risk of a plan, however, is that you start following it. As Eisenhower once said during D-Day, I said, I love the concept of planning. I just don't believe in the plan. When you're at war, when you're in development, the plan is built at the point in time where you know the least and all the risks are in front of you. So better than just to follow the plan and try to execute it, the plan is there to have you prepared and have you responding to change, because that's the way things are. That's the way of the world. So responding to change actually makes it possible for you to reach your goal. And that is the Agile Manifesto. So now we have the foundational elements in place. First we have lean, with the lean thinking ideas, respect for people, flow, and continuous improvement. Second, we have the Agile Manifesto, saying individual interactions are more important than processes and tools, working software or product is more important than comprehensive documentation, and customer collaboration is more important than contract negotiation, so that you can respond to change rather than follow the plan. If you combine these, the world starts to look a little bit different. However, in the 2080s and forward, till this very moment, we saw Scrum teams pop up everywhere and Agile teams starting all kinds of places. As a result, Scrum and Agile became kind of mainstream. Currently, we see companies that have 20, 40, 100, up to hundreds of Scrum teams working in parallel at the same time. Because of that, the question now came, how do you organize that? Because these autonomous little teams trying to move their way around and get the highest value to the customer is great, but for bigger companies with bigger strategies and bigger portfolios, it's a challenge to coordinate all that and make it work. Now there has been different strategies on scaling, and there are different methods such as SAFe, the Scaled Agile Framework by Dean Leffingwell, Scrum of Scrums, Enterprise Scrum, Nexus, Jeff Sutherland, Ken Schwaber, Less by Bas Vodde and Craig Larman. These are all methods that make you think on how to organize and how to synchronize scaling Agile. There are a couple of foundational truths that I'd like to share, and the other things are, well, it's your choice. And it's basically a company's choice and an organizational choice to say, okay, I'm going more with SAFe or Nexus or Less. That's a preference that anyone should make by themselves based on their changed context. I have a personal preference, but I'm not going to share that right now, because for you it's the most effective to figure out your own idea of what it means for you and your environment. The first foundational truth is that if you have multiple teams working on something, the first rule is synchronize them. If you have multiple Scrum teams running cycles or Agile teams running cycles, these cycles have to match. Monday is end of your cycle day or end of sprint day or check out what we have day. Whatever you want to call it, there is a synchronization question if you have multiple teams working together. Now the magic, of course, that then becomes, if you do this, you can start thinking about introducing integrated demonstrations of multiple teams producing one product. Working product over comprehensive documentation at the bigger scale. Prove me not only that you have done your part of the increment as a team, but prove to me that it works as a whole. The system works. So now the synchronization allows you to demonstrate the result of multiple teams at the same time. This idea of synchronization, it's not new. This is lean from old days in the 1970s again. Synchronizing the work and creating cadence. Like a heartbeat, every 2 weeks. We'll integrate your stuff and show it as a whole. So now subsystems, multiple teams have to work together and are being pulled into integrating their stuff and showing their result at a higher level. Because of that, you have something wonderful. You have a system that consists of teams. You have a team of teams working together to produce a bigger integrated result. Now that cycle is something that you will see your VPs and CEOs are more interested in. They cannot join all the separate demonstrations of all the separate small teams, but this demonstration of multiple teams together, they can and they will join. They want to see that bigger result. They want to see the joint results of all these teams teaming up together. Thus you've installed a new feedback cycle on a far, far higher level. Now looking at bigger portfolios and strategies, the second fundamental thing you need to start thinking about is how to align the big system and the big portfolio with all these teams and their promises. So the promise proof cycle of a team during a couple of weeks is something you can work on a feature level for products very nicely. What you will typically see on top of that is an enterprise. A big company tries to move forward every couple of months and review its strategy, review its portfolio, its tactics. And I have seen that a very effective model for that is a 3-monthly checkup. Organize a 3-monthly big room planning session where you invite all the members of all the teams that are in the subsystem, so that may be 6 to 8 teams, all the management, a couple of stakeholders, some of the dependencies are jointly addressed and discussed. So you get all the people into the same room and you plan together co-located. You plan together roughly your tactics or your goals for the next 3 months. So this means you're tying your portfolio, your longer term goals, to the actual cadence of the Agile teams moving forward. And this has been done in different ways. But this is the foundational idea on portfolio management. And in front of these big room planning days, we have a funnel in which you need to figure out what things to do first. So your big chunks, your big projects need to be chopped into smaller chunks just in time for you to feed them into the 3-monthly cycle, saying, okay, this is the most important thing we have to do right now. It will change, but this is what we want from a strategy perspective right now, would like to do. And that feeds your teams with context, with understanding and commitment to making a goal for a couple of months happen, which leads them to be better, because now they understand it's not just one little battle in this whole war they're now looking at. So if you're looking at the strategy, they now become part of implementing and executing on the strategy, which makes them a little stronger because now they understand what they're here for. So tying your portfolio management by creating a funnel where your big things get sliced into smaller things that just fit a number of teams, and then plan together in a couple of days, after which the teams are going to execute, giving the results back every 2 weeks. This is proven to be a wonderful way to do Agile at a larger scale, and that's the current state of Agile at scale.
Hi, welcome to a short interview with Eelco Rustenburg. Eelco, you explained how leadership from a lean point of view is meant to support teams. Does it go for globally distributed teams as well?
Well, that's a good question. I often get that question, and I think it's even more important than it would be in more collocated systems. In a globally distributed system, there's a higher need for support because it's harder. Communication, working together as a team, working together at multiple teams. If you're scaling this up to even bigger sizes, it goes across the globe. So you have more support needs than a team that's working nicely in a building with a VP next door. So I think from a leadership perspective, understanding that the support you need to give to teams who are more globally distributed because of business and excellence reasons is foundational to your success. You have to look at that perspective even more.
Yeah.
So the most common thing is that people say, well, our tools are crappy, or we can't figure out how to connect to the other side, or we can't get access to their code base because of all these impediments that organizations have put up of skill-based silos across the globe. So I think as a leadership team, you need to start saying, okay, if individuals and interactions are important to make Agile work, it's the first foundational element of what makes it work, then we have to start thinking about how to use processes and tools and how to use our globally distributed situation for the better of interaction and individuals. So I think open source, for example, is showing that this can very well be done. So open source leaders, they typically show the kind of leadership that you would expect or hope to see in globally distributed big organizations, enterprises.
Okay.
So that would be, for me, would be the one thing to actually look for in lean leadership. Support the teams in their challenge.
Yeah. Okay, and then talking about challenges for globally distributed teams, if you talked about scaling Agile, what kind of specific challenges occur in such globally distributed teams?
Well, it starts with the interaction. I think the idea of big room planning and bringing everybody together every 3 months and saying, okay, here's 2 days of you, the management, everybody together starts to plan out or put the tactics in place for the next 3 months.
And that's physically together.
That's physically together. That kind of compensates for the fact that you don't know people that well anymore. Because you have to work with people on a day-to-day basis and you haven't met them ever. And you're trying to understand even their needs. So you're in India, you're an Indian software developer, you're building something for a product manager or its customers who is in US or the Netherlands or France or all. If you don't meet people from these cultures, if you don't connect, this will be a hard time. I've seen that over and over again. So I think the challenges that you have to overcome are of this kind. This interaction model kind of makes it happen. The system demos, the idea of integrated demos of multiple teams working together actually eases your organizational structure into globally distributed systems. Because I don't think we can say we're not going to have globally distributed systems. You have an enterprise, you have people and talent working across the globe. You can't say, I want every value chain to perfectly match my geographic locations. That would be kind of a fairy tale enterprise. So I believe that putting the responsibility for interaction in the teams, which is, I think, one of the core things, and then facilitating that by allowing people to fly over every 3 months and say, okay, let's meet up. Let's see each other and start to understand. I've noticed this myself. I had a team in India and a team in the Netherlands. It wasn't working well from a cultural aspect, from a working together aspect. Only when I took a number of developers and went to India and started to see the context in which they are trying to understand us, you're like, oh my God, now I understand. And you start building the bridge. You have to. So we said basically, let's stop thinking of an India team and a Netherlands team. Let's think of two teams who both have the problem of interaction across the ocean inside.
Yep.
Because that's where people start to resolve it, if it's their problem. If you as a manager say, I'll be the bridge and I'll make sure these teams work together, well, good luck with that. That's what I would really recommend. Get people together and get out of the way to make them solve their own problem.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay, well done.